It was just another night cutting off an entitled customer, until her bodyguard leaned over the polished bar and whispered 5 words that changed everything. He said, "She just lost a $1 billion war." In that moment, the rude woman at my bar wasn't just a patron. She was a Fortune 500 CEO, utterly defeated, and my simple act of saying no was the first genuine kindness she'd felt in months. I'm Alex, a single father who works nights to pay the bills. She was a leaner Vance, a legend who built an empire from nothing, only to watch it almost slip away in a single vote. In that quiet bar, 2 worlds collided. Hers was a world of private jets and boardroom coups. Mine was one of daycare schedules and juggling rent. But for one moment, none of that mattered, because her armor was cracked and my simple, firm no was the only real thing she'd heard in months. This is what happens when the most powerful person in the room has nothing left, and the only person who tells her the truth is the one she's been taught to ignore. To understand why that whisper in the bar mattered, you have to understand the war Alina Vance had just lost. Her company, Vance Innovations, wasn't just a business. It was a $20 billion empire she built from her college dorm room, a tech titan that dominated green energy. But for the last 6 months, a rival conglomerate, Tiberius Group, had been executing a relentless hostile takeover. They wanted her patents, her tech, and they wanted her gone. For weeks, the financial news was a countdown. The final shareholder vote was that afternoon. Alina needed 51%. She got 49%. She lost by 2%. 2%. That's the margin between ruling your world and watching it get carved up by strangers. The headlines that evening were brutal. Vance toppled. The Iron CEO cracks. She didn't go home. She couldn't. She told her driver to just go, and eventually he stopped here, the Oasis. A quiet, mid-tier bar where no one would think to look for her. My world was different. The Oasis wasn't a refuge for me, it was my second job. By day, I worked at an auto shop. By night, I tended bar. The math was simple, and it was for my daughter, Chloe. She's 7. She has cystic fibrosis. The medical bills are a mountain no single parent can climb alone, not on a mechanic's salary. So I poured drinks, I listened to problems, and I enforced one non-negotiable rule. You get rude, you get cut off. No exceptions. It was the one piece of authority I had in my life, a small line in the sand. That night, my manager, Rick, pulled me aside. "Big party in booth 6, celebrating some corporate win. Keep him happy, keep him spending." I nodded. Booth 6 was already loud. Back in Alina's world, the loss wasn't just professional. It was deeply personal. Tiberius Group was run by a man named Silas Thorne, a former friend of her father's. Her own father, Robert Vance, a old-school industrialist, had warned her for years about Silas. "He's a predator, Ellie. He doesn't build, he devours." She hadn't listened. She saw her father's caution as fear, his wisdom as obsolete. In her drive to be utterly self-made, she'd pushed him away. Now, sitting in the back of her town car after the vote, his was the only call she didn't answer. The guilt was a colder weight than the failure. At the bar, I was in my rhythm. Chloe was with my sister for the night, so my mind was clear, focused on the orders. The party in booth 6 was getting louder. They were associates from Tiberius Group, the winning side, celebrating their conquest. They were obnoxious, snapping their fingers for service, but they were spending. Then, around 10:30, a woman walked in alone. She sat at the far end of the bar, away from everyone. She ordered a neat scotch, something expensive we actually kept for show. She didn't look at her phone. She just stared at the bottles behind me, her eyes hollow. I could recognize someone trying to outrun their own thoughts. I poured the drink, left her alone. Alina's bodyguard, Marcus, took a seat at a table nearby, his eyes constantly scanning. He'd been with her for 5 years. He'd seen her crush competitors, launch products, command rooms. He'd never seen her like this, defeated, silent, fragile. His job was to protect her from threats, but how do you protect someone from their own crumbling world? He watched as the Tiberius Group's laughter grew louder, their toasts more pointed. To the fall of an icon, one slurred. Alina's shoulders tightened. She signaled me for another scotch, then another. Here, where the night split into 2 parallel tracks, in booth 6, the victors grew bolder. One, a young executive with too much confidence, swaggered over to Alina's end of the bar. He leaned in, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "Rough day at the office, huh? Don't worry, I hear Thorne's a generous guy. He'll probably give you a consulting gig." Alina didn't even look at him. She just swirled her glass. That's when he made his mistake. He reached out and tapped her shoulder. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Show some respect to the New World Order." Marcus was on his feet instantly, but I was closer. "Sir," I said, my voice calm but firm, "you need to step back and return to your table." He laughed in my face. "Or what, bartender, you gonna cut me off?" I looked at his eyes, glassy and aggressive. I looked at Alina, who had gone very still. "Actually, yes," I said. "I am. You're done for the night." The man's friends erupted, yelling about how much they were spending. My manager Rick appeared, sweating. "Alex, maybe just comp them around." I shook my head. "The policy is the policy, Rick. He's harassing another guest. He's done." The man shoved his empty glass toward me. "You have no idea who you're talking to." And I replied with the line that changes everything in these stories. "I don't care who you are, you're leaving." The man spat an insult, but his friends, not wanting real trouble, pulled him away. The bar fell into an uneasy quiet. I turned to Alina. "I apologize for that." She finally looked at me, not through me, but at me. Her voice was quiet, frayed. "Why did you do that?" It wasn't a thank you. It was a genuine question. She was a CEO. She understood cost-benefit analysis. I'd just chosen a silent, distressed woman over a table spending $1,000. I shrugged. "It's the rule." She stared for another second, then said, "I'll have another." I looked at the glass in front of her, then back at her. I made a decision. "No," I said softly. "I think you're done too. Let me call you a cab." That's when her mask, the last remaining piece, shattered. Her eyes flashed with a fury that had once made VPs cry. "You are refusing me service. Do you know what I could do to this place? To you?" I didn't flinch. "I've been yelled at by drunk guys bigger and meaner." "Ma'am, it's my job. You've had enough. It's for your safety." She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Safety? You think this is about safety? This is about control. Your little pathetic bit of control." That stung. But before I could respond, Marcus was there. He didn't address her. He leaned over the bar to me, his voice so low only I could hear. "Her name is Alina Vance. She's the CEO of Vance Innovations. She just lost a hostile takeover vote this afternoon. She's not drunk. She's shattered. And you're the first person in months who hasn't wanted something from her. You just saw a person." He pulled back, placed a black American Express card on the bar. "For her tab and for the trouble." I stood there, the name clicking into place. I'd seen her face on magazine covers in the grocery store line, the billionaire who had it all. Now she was here at my bar, looking utterly lost. She was watching Marcus talk to me, confusion replacing her anger. Marcus helped her from the stool. As they turned to leave, she glanced back at me. Not with anger anymore, but with something worse, a bewildered, raw curiosity. They left. The bar felt empty. I finished my shift in a daze. I didn't tell Rick, I just cleaned up and left. The next morning, I was at the auto shop, covered in grease, trying to figure out how to pay for Chloe's new prescription. My phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't know. The voice on the other end was polished, calm. "Mr. Hayes, this is Meredith Thorne of the Tiberius Group. We have a business proposal for you. Can you meet this afternoon?" I was about to hang up on a spam call when she said, "It's regarding your interaction last night at the Oasis. We believe you might be instrumental in a transition plan for Vance Innovations." My blood ran cold. They weren't just taking her company. They were gathering intelligence, and they thought I was a pawn. But that was just the first call. The second came an hour later. This voice was older, gravelly, with authority. "Alex Hayes, this is Robert Vance, Alina's father. We need to talk, immediately. It's about my daughter's safety." 2 calls, 2 sides of a billion-dollar war, and both of them had just landed in the middle of my life, my daughter's life, because of one simple rule. You get rude, you get cut off. I had no idea that by holding my ground, I hadn't just refused a drink. I had pulled a single thread, and the entire tapestry of power was beginning to unravel. I stood in the garage, grease on my hands, staring at my phone. 2 calls, 2 wars, and I was now a battlefield. The rational part of my brain screamed to ignore them both, to just go back to the engine block and my quiet, predictable life of struggle. But there was Chloe. The Tiberius Group woman Meredith had mentioned a substantial compensation package. That phrase echoed in the hollow space of my bank account. Robert Vance's call felt different, heavier, laced with a fear that wasn't about money. I called him back first. We met in a quiet, wood-paneled study at his club, a place that smelled of old leather and older money. Robert Vance wasn't what I expected. He was in his 70s with sharp eyes but a tremor in his hands. He didn't offer me money. He offered me a story. "My daughter," he began, "is the most brilliant, stubborn person I know. She built her company to prove she didn't need me, and she was right. But now she's in danger, not from Silas Thorne's business tactics. From Silas Thorne, period." He slid a file across the desk. It contained photos taken from a distance of a leaner leaving her office, getting into her car, walking into her building. Then a second set, the same angles but with red circles around figures in the background. Different men, same intent stare. "Private security?" I asked. "Thorne's surveillance," Robert corrected. "He's not just taking her company. He's ensuring she has no way back. He's isolating her. And after last night, he's now aware of you." He explained that Thorne's play was psychological warfare. The takeover vote was just step one. Step two was to destabilize Alina completely, to make her seem unfit, so the board would gladly hand over the keys. A public meltdown, a scandal, a breakdown, any of these would do. "Your bar," Robert said, "was the first place she went where she wasn't Alina Vance, CEO. She was just a person. And you saw that. My sources at Tiberius say they see you as a potential vulnerability in her armor. They think they can buy you or break you to get to her." He leaned forward. "I am not asking you to be a hero. I am asking you to be a witness. If they approach you, I need to know. And if you see her again, just be kind. She has no one right now." I left that meeting with a knot in my stomach. I was being asked to spy, but for the good side. It felt just as dirty. The next day I met Meredith Thorne. The setting was the opposite, a sleek minimalist office in the Tiberius Tower, all cold glass and white surfaces. She was elegant, razor sharp. "We are simply ensuring a smooth transition, Mr. Hayes. Change is difficult, especially for someone as entrenched as Ms. Vance. We understand she was quite distressed at your establishment. We're concerned about her well-being." She painted a picture of Alina as emotionally unstable, a liability to her own company's future. Then she got to the point. "We would like to retain you as a consultant. Your fee would be $25,000. All we require is a signed statement detailing her behavior that night, her intoxication, her belligerence, anything that might indicate impaired judgment. A simple truth." $25,000. It was more than I made in 4 months. It would cover Chloe's next 2 treatments easily, all for telling the truth. But it wasn't the whole truth. She wasn't drunk. She was heartbroken, and this statement would be a weapon. I told her I needed to think about it. She smiled, a thin, cold line. "Of course. But consider the alternative. The Oasis has several health code violations on file. A single, detailed complaint from a powerful group about an intoxicated patron being overserved could shutter it. And where would that leave your second income, Mr. Hayes?" The threat was clear. I was a pawn, but a pawn that could be removed. For 3 days I lived in a state of paralysis. I went to work, I picked up Chloe from school, I tried to act normal. Then on Thursday night she walked into the Oasis again. Alina, alone. She sat at the same corner of the bar. She looked exhausted but clear-eyed. This time she ordered a club soda. I poured it, slid it to her. We didn't speak for 10 minutes. Finally, she said, "You took a call from my father." It wasn't a question. "How did you?" "Marcus is very good at his job. He's also loyal to my father, which is currently a point of contention." She took a sip. "He also told me you met with Meredith Thorne. You're a popular man." I felt exposed. They both approached me. I haven't done anything for either. "Why not?" she asked, genuinely curious. "The money from Thorne could change your life. My father's request offers you nothing but trouble." I wiped the bar, buying time, because it doesn't feel right. "I cut you off because you were at your limit, not to become a piece in someone's game." She studied me, and for the first time I saw the calculating CEO surface through the grief. A piece in a game. That's exactly what we all are. Do you know what they're doing now? Tiberius. They're going after my patents, not through the courts, through the inventors. They're offering bonuses, threatening visas, digging up old non-disclosure agreements. They're dismantling my life's work bolt by bolt, and they're doing it quietly, legally. My father wants me to fight back with a war chest I no longer have. He doesn't understand that the war is already over. Then she said something that changed the axis of everything. The bodyguard, Marcus, he told me what he said to you, that you were the first person in months who didn't want something from me. She looked down at her hands. He was wrong. I think you do want something, I just don't know what it is yet. And before I could respond, she stood up. I'm having a meeting here tomorrow, a private one, with one of my lead engineers, a man named Leo. He's the key to the core battery patent. Tiberius hasn't gotten to him yet. I need a neutral space. Can I reserve the back room? It was a simple business request to a bartender, but it was also a test. I said yes. The next evening, the back room was occupied. A leaner and a nervous-looking man in his 40s, Leo, were huddled over a laptop. I was their waiter, bringing waters, keeping other patrons away. Halfway through, Leo's phone rang. He looked at the screen and went pale. It's a Tiberius headhunter. They've called me every day this week. Alina urged him to ignore it, but the pressure was visible on the man's face. He was a scientist, not a soldier. The meeting ended with Leo promising to stay loyal, but his hand shook as he packed his bag. After he left, Alina didn't move. She just sat in the dim room, the blue light of the laptop reflecting in her eyes. I walked in to clear the glasses. He'll leave, she said quietly to no one. They all leave. They have families, mortgages. They can't afford to be on the losing side. I didn't know what to say, so I said, you built it once. You could build it again. She laughed, a sad sound. With what? My reputation is the loser. My confidence is gone. And my father, he looks at me with pity. That's the worst part. Then her own phone buzzed. She read a message and her face completely drained of color. She stood up so fast the chair toppled over. I have to go. What happened? I asked, instinct taking over. She showed me the screen. It was a news alert. Vance Innovations lead engineer Leo Chen in critical condition after apparent hit-and-run. The article stated it happened 20 minutes ago, 3 blocks from his home. It wasn't an accident, she whispered, her voice trembling with a fury I'd never heard. They just showed me they can touch anyone near me. They just showed me they're not playing a game. She ran out, Marcus falling in step behind her. I closed up the bar that night with a cold dread. This wasn't about corporate espionage anymore. This was violence. The next morning, I went to see Robert Vance. I told him about the meeting, about Leo. The old man's face turned to stone. Silas has crossed a line, but we have no proof. The police will call it an accident. Then he dropped his own bombshell. Alina is resigning. The board has called an emergency vote for Monday morning. She's going to step down. Silas has promised to be merciful if she goes quietly. He looked at me exhausted. It's over. But I couldn't accept that. I didn't know Alina Vance, not really. But I knew what it was like to be backed into a corner, to have your child's future threatened. I made a decision. I called Meredith Thorne and told her I would sign her statement. I said I needed the money up front. She agreed to meet me at the Tiberius offices that afternoon to finalize it. What I didn't tell her was that in my pocket, courtesy of a very paranoid Robert Vance, was a miniature voice recorder. I was going to walk into the lion's den and get a confession. It was a stupid, dangerous plan, but it was the only move I had left. Receptionist led me into Meredith's office. She smiled her thin smile and slid a document and a check across the desk. Just sign at the bottom, Mr. Hayes. Your discretion is appreciated. I picked up the pen. Before I do, I need to know something. Leo Chen, the engineer who was hit by a car last night, was that part of the smooth transition? Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes turned to ice. Tragic accidents happen every day. It has nothing to do with our business. I pressed. It seems like a big coincidence. You're trying to get his patent and he suddenly can't work. She leaned back. Mr. Hayes, you are being paid for your signature, not for your conspiracy theories. Sign the paper. I knew I had to push harder. What if I do? What if I go to the press and tell them you tried to buy a false statement about Alina Vance? Now her smile vanished. Then we would have to reveal that you, a bartender with a chronically ill daughter, attempted to extort money from us by threatening to sell a fabricated story. We have this entire meeting on our security system. You would be ruined and you would never work in the city again. And your daughter's medical care, well, she had played her hand. The threat was explicit. It was what I needed. I had her on tape admitting to the coercion, to the threat. I stood up, leaving the paper unsigned. I think we're done here. Her composure cracked. You have no idea what you're walking away from or what you're walking into. As I left the building, my heart was pounding. I had the recording. It was flimsy, but it was something. I called Robert Vance and told him to meet me. But as I stepped onto the sidewalk, a black sedan pulled up. Two men in suits got out, not Marcus. These men were broader, colder. One spoke. Mr. Hayes, Mr. Thorne would like a word. It wasn't a request. I took a step back. I'm not getting in that car, the man smiled. It's not about you. It's about your daughter, Chloe. She gets out of school at 3:15, right? We can give her a ride instead. Time stopped. The street noise faded into a muffled roar. They knew my daughter's name. They knew her schedule. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was a declaration of war, and my family was now on the front line. Every instinct screamed to run to the school. But that's what they wanted, panic, a predictable move. I forced my breath to slow. I looked the lead man in the eye. You touch a single hair on her head, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm. And the recording of Meredith Thorne threatening my child and admitting to corporate coercion goes to every news outlet in the city. It's already uploaded. A dead man's switch. It was a bluff. The recorder was in my pocket, but their hesitation told me everything. They exchanged a glance. I used that second to turn and walk away, not run into the crowded midday foot traffic. I didn't look back. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial my sister, Jess. Get Chloe, now, don't go home. Take her to Mom's house upstate. Don't tell anyone where you're going. I didn't explain. She heard the tremor in my voice and just said, okay, I've got her. Next, I called the only person who might have the resources to understand this. Not Robert, Alina. She answered on the first ring. They just threatened my daughter, I said, no greeting. There was a sharp intake of breath. Where are you? 2 blocks from Tiberius Tower. Get to the parking garage at 45 Fifth, level B2. Marcus will meet you. Go now. 10 minutes later, I was in the back of a different, nondescript sedan. Marcus drove, his eyes constantly on the mirrors. Alina was in the passenger seat. Play it, she said. I fumbled with the recorder, playing the last 60 seconds of my conversation with Meredith. When the threat against Chloe finished, the car was silent. Alina's knuckles were white on the dashboard. I'm so sorry, Alex. This is my fault. It's Thorne's fault, Marcus corrected, his voice a low growl. But it changes the board. They've shown their hand. They think intimidation is the final move. It usually is, Alina said, defeated. No, I said, surprising myself. It's the move of someone who's scared of what you still have. What do you still have, Alina? She was quiet for a long moment. A prototype, she said finally. Leo's final project. A solid-state battery design that doubles capacity at half the cost. The patent is pending, but the schematics and the only working prototype are in a secure lab. Tiberius doesn't have it. It's the crown jewel. It's why they want Leo out of the way so badly. If I resign, the intellectual property becomes an asset of the company which they now control. They get it. If I fight, I could potentially license it elsewhere, but they'll destroy you first, I finished. She nodded. We use the recording, Marcus stated. We go public. And say what? Alina countered. That a powerful corporation threatened a bartender. They'll spin it as a misunderstanding, sue you for defamation, and still take everything. We need something undeniable. We need Silas Thorne himself. That's when Marcus dropped his own bombshell. He'd been doing his own digging. Thorne isn't just a businessman. He has ties to offshore accounts, to a network of private security firms that blur the line into mercenary work. The hit on Leo wasn't an isolated tactic. It's a pattern. I've found 2 other cases. Engineers from acquired companies who had accidents during negotiations. The police found nothing. He's a predator and he thinks he's untouchable. He looked at Alina in the rear view. Your father knows some of this. He's been trying to find a smoking gun for years. We needed a new plan, a reckless one. Alina was still CEO for 72 more hours until the resignation vote. She still had access to certain internal systems. Marcus proposed using that access to set a trap. Thorne was arrogant. He liked to gloat to savor his wins. What if Alina requested a final, private meeting to discuss terms of her departure? A show of surrender. He'd likely agree. And if that meeting were somewhere we could control, somewhere we could get him to admit to his crimes on record, it's a huge risk, I said. If he suspects anything, he'll destroy me, Alina said quietly. Then she looked at me. But he's already threatening a little girl, so I'm done playing defense. The meeting was set for the next evening at a neutral location, a private members club where Marcus had secured the room and, more importantly, controlled the surveillance. My job was to be there, posing as staff, to manage the audio recording. It was insane. I was a mechanic and a bartender, not a spy. But I was also the one with the recorder in my pocket, the one Thorne had personally threatened. I had skin in the game. The day of the meeting, the tension was a physical weight. I was suited up as a waiter, my hands clammy. Marcus had wired the room with 3 separate audio feeds and a hidden camera. We had one shot. At 7 p.m., Silas Thorne arrived. He was in his 60s with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. He brought 2 associates, but they waited outside. He walked in, saw Alina sitting alone, and spread his arms. "Ellie, so good of you to see reason." I served them water, my heart hammering against my ribs. The meeting began with corporate niceties, Thorne laying out his generous severance package. Alina played her part perfectly, voice subdued, defeated. Then she subtly steered the conversation. "I need assurances, Silas, about my people. Leo Chen, that was tragic." Thorne waved a hand. "A terrible accident. The city streets are dangerous. But don't worry, his family will be taken care of. A generous settlement from the company." "It's strange," Alina pressed, "how often accidents happen to people who are inconvenient." Thorne's smile tightened. "Now, Ellie, don't let paranoia spoil your graceful exit. Some people are just unlucky, like that bartender who's been bothering you. What was his name? Hayes. Unfortunate things can happen to anyone who sticks their nose where it doesn't belong." It was working. He was circling the truth. Alina pushed further, mentioning the pressure on other engineers. Thorne, growing impatient and overconfident, finally snapped. "For God's sake, Alina, this is how the world works. You build or you get removed. I remove obstacles. It's efficient. It's business. You used to understand that before you went soft." He leaned across the table. "Sign the papers, walk away with your money, and your bartender friend and his sick little girl can go back to their quiet, insignificant lives, or become obstacles themselves. The choice is yours." There it was, an admission wrapped in a threat. I had it. We had him. As I left the room to fetch more water, I gave Marcus a tiny nod from the hall. It was done. We had the evidence. The plan was to go straight to Robert Vance and his legal team, then to the authorities and the press. But we had made a fatal error. We assumed Thorne's arrogance meant he was careless. He wasn't. As Thorne left the club, one of his men accidentally bumped into me. A moment later, my pocket felt lighter. The recorder was gone. "They made me." I rushed to Marcus. "They took it. They have the recording." His face went grim. "They'll destroy it. And now they know we were recording. They'll accelerate everything." We were out of time and out of proof. Alina's resignation was tomorrow at 9 a.m. Without that recording, it was over. We gathered in a safe room Robert had on standby, a small, secure office. The mood was funeral. Alina sat, staring at the floor. "I'll resign. It's the only way to make them stop." Robert Vance looked older than I'd ever seen him. "I've failed you," he said to his daughter. But I couldn't accept it. Chloe was safe with my mom, but for how long? If Thorne won completely, he'd have no reason to ever stop looking over his shoulder. He'd want loose ends tied up. People like me. I thought about the recorder. It was a digital file. When I'd activated it, it had also created a backup on an app on my phone, a cloud sync I'd forgotten about. I frantically pulled out my phone. The app required a password I hadn't used in years. I tried every combination I could think of. Nothing. Then I remembered. The password was Chloe's name and her birthday. I typed it in. The app opened, there was a file list, and there it was, Recording 3. I'd never renamed it. It was the raw, unedited file from the meeting with Thorne. I have it, I whispered, then louder. I have it, it's here. The room erupted. But Marcus held up a hand. We can't just release it. Thorne's lawyers will tie us up in courts for years. We need to force a public confrontation where he can't spin it. We need to make him react in the open. And that's when Alina stood up, a fire back in her eyes I hadn't seen since the first night. Then we don't go to the boardroom tomorrow to resign, she said. We go to wage war. We take this to the shareholders directly, right before the vote. We play his voice for everyone. It was a nuclear option. It would be chaos. It might not work, but it was the only move left. The next morning at 8:45, the Sterling Global boardroom was packed. Shareholders, board members, lawyers. Silas Thorne sat at the head of the table, already looking like a victor. The agenda, the acceptance of Alina Vance's resignation and the immediate election of Thorne as chairman. At 8:50, the doors opened. But it wasn't just Alina who walked in. It was Alina, Robert, Vance, Marcus, and me. A murmur went through the room. Thorne's smile vanished. This is a closed meeting, he snapped. Alina walked to the front of the room, ignoring him. She plugged her laptop into the overhead projector. Shareholders of Vance Innovations, she began, her voice clear and strong. You are here to vote on the future of this company. Before you do, you deserve to know the character of the man who wants to lead it. Thorne was on his feet, yelling for security, but Robert Vance spoke, his voice booming with old authority. Let her speak. You all know me. You know I built the foundation of this industry. Hear this. Iner clicked play, and Silas Thorne's voice, cold and clear, filled the silent, opulent room. I remove obstacles. It's efficient. It's business. Your bartender friend and his sick little girl can go back to their quiet, insignificant lives or become obstacles themselves. The room exploded. Lawyers shouted. Shareholders gasped. Thorne's face was purple with rage. This is a fraud, a deepfake. This man, he pointed a trembling finger at me, is a disgruntled employee she paid to set me up. It was the moment we'd hoped for, his public, unhinged reaction. But what happened next we never expected. From the back of the room, a man stood up. It was Leo Chen's brother, a quiet man who owned a small but significant block of shares. He spoke, his voice thick with emotion. My brother is in a coma because he refused to be your obstacle, Mr. Thorne. The police found paint fragments on his clothes, from a car registered to a shell company, a company that traces back to you. He held up a folder. We have the forensic report. It wasn't an accident. It was the second hammer blow. Thorne had been too confident, too messy. He stared, his empire of lies collapsing in real time under the gaze of the people he needed to control. He didn't crumble, he snarled. You think this matters? I own half the people in this room. The vote will proceed. But the room was turning, a tide of shock and revulsion rolling against him. Alina saw her chance. She didn't ask for her job back. She made a demand. I move for a vote of no confidence in the pending merger with Tiberius Group, and I call for an immediate audit of all interactions between Tiberius and this board. Chaos, pure, beautiful chaos. The meeting descended into shouts and procedural arguments, but the seed was planted. The narrative had flipped. As security finally moved to restore order, Thorne was led out not as a victor but as a man under siege. He passed by me and his whisper was venomous. This isn't over, Hayes, you're dead. But for the first time I wasn't afraid, because he was wrong. His power was an illusion and we had just shattered the mirror. The battle for the boardroom was won. But the war for our lives was just beginning. And the final move would have to be made not in a corporate tower, but in the real world, where the rules are much simpler and the stakes are final. In the days that followed, the fallout was swift, public, and merciless. But the real battle wasn't fought in the headlines. It was fought in the quiet spaces between survival and starting over. Silas Thorne was arrested on charges of conspiracy, witness intimidation, and attempted fraud within 48 hours. The recording, the forensic report on Leo's accident, and the sudden willingness of several terrified Tiberius associates to cooperate created an avalanche. His empire began to dissolve. The hostile takeover of Vance Innovations was nullified by the board. citing evidence of bad faith and criminal activity. Alina was reinstated as CEO by unanimous vote. On paper, she had won. But winning felt nothing like she expected. The company was wounded, its reputation stained, its employees traumatized. Leo remained in a coma. The weight of that knowledge was heavier than any stock price. She didn't return to her corner office with a triumph. She called a company-wide meeting and did something unheard of. She apologized. She took responsibility for the culture that made the company a target for failing to protect her people. She announced that her first act was to establish a foundation, funded by her own shares, to cover all medical costs for Leo and his family for life, and to create a legal defense fund for employees targeted by corporate aggression. It wasn't a business strategy. It was an act of penance. My life underwent its own seismic shift. With Thorne in custody, the immediate threat to Chloe faded, but the experience had changed the calculus of my world. I couldn't go back to just being a mechanic and a bartender, not with the target that had been on my back. Robert Vance offered me a job, head of corporate security. It was a six-figure salary, benefits, stability, everything I needed. I turned it down. The look on his face was pure confusion. Why on earth would you refuse? I told him I didn't belong in a suit in a tower. My understanding of security was more concrete. I had a different proposal. During the crisis, I'd seen the gaping holes in Alina's protection. Marcus was one man. Thorne had exploited systemic weaknesses, surveillance, data trails, the patterns of daily life. I proposed to Robert and Alina that I start a small, discreet firm specializing in executive protection for people in high-stakes transitions, CEOs facing ousters, whistleblowers, inventors like Leo. Protection that wasn't just about muscle, but about understanding how everyday life can be weaponized. I'd use my knowledge from the auto shop to secure vehicles, my bartender's eye for reading people, and the brutal lesson I'd just learned. Robert agreed to be my first investor. Alina signed on as my first client. The surprising detail, the one that reshaped everything, came from Robert Vance 2 weeks later. He invited me to his home, not his office. Over whiskey, he slid an old, faded photograph across the table. It showed a younger Robert in workman's clothes standing in front of a small, struggling machine shop. "I wasn't born into this, Alex," he said. "I was a machinist. I built my first prototype in a garage that looked a lot like yours. My wife, Alina's mother, was a waitress. We struggled for every penny. I thought giving Alina everything I never had was the gift. I now see it was the curse. It built her armor, but it walled her in." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "You saw the person behind the armor when no one else could, not even me. That's why I'm investing in you, not just for her, for the man I used to be." That conversation changed my relationship with Alina. We were no longer the billionaire and the bartender. We were two people who had faced a common enemy and survived, both carrying the scars. We started having coffee, then dinners, talking about everything except business. I introduced her to Chloe. My daughter, who's afraid of nothing, took one look at the powerful CEO and asked if she wanted to help build a Lego spaceship. Alina, who could negotiate a billion-dollar deal, looked terrified. But she sat on the floor and tried. She was terrible at it. Chloe laughed, and for the first time, I heard Alina laugh without a trace of bitterness. 6 months later, Vance Innovations was recovering, leaner and more focused. My new security firm, Anchor Point, had 4 clients and was in the black. Alina and I were something, not dating in any conventional sense. We were partners in a quiet understanding. Then she asked me to meet her at the Oasis. She had a proposition. We sat at the same corner of the bar. Rick, my old manager, nearly fainted when she walked in. She ordered 2 club sodas. "I'm selling the company," she said flatly. I almost choked. "What? Why? You just got it back." "I got it back to fix it and to set it free," she explained. "The board has agreed to a management-led buyout. The employees will get ownership shares. I'll stay on as a consultant for 2 years to guide the transition, but I'm stepping down." I was stunned. "What will you do?" She smiled, a genuine, light smile. "I'm going to invest in people, in ideas that matter, in companies that build things, not just consume them. and I want you to come with me." She laid out her vision. She wasn't retiring, she was redirecting. She wanted to create a venture fund focused on sustainable technology and ethical business, with a mandate to protect the people behind the ideas. "I need a partner who understands the ground, who knows what it's like to build something with your hands, and who knows the cost when the powerful decide to take it. I need you, Alex." It wasn't a job offer. It was an invitation to build a new empire on our own terms. "What about Chloe?" I asked. Her expression softened. "She's part of the package. We build a future that's safe for her and for kids like her. That's the whole point." I said yes. Not for the money, but for the chance to build something that couldn't be taken by a hostile vote or a black sedan. We spent the next year building it. We called the fund Second Origin. Our first major investment was to buy the failing auto shop where I used to work and transform it into an advanced prototyping facility, giving the mechanics equity. Leo Chen woke from his coma. He recovered, and we hired him as our chief of innovation. His first project was a medical device, inspired by Chloe's struggles. The final scene, the one that closes the loop, happened on a Tuesday, not at a boardroom or a bar, but at a park. Chloe was playing on the swings. Elena and I were on a bench reviewing plans for a new battery plant. She was wearing jeans, something I'd never seen before. My phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Silas Thorne had been found guilty on all counts. Sentencing was next month. He would spend a long time in a very small room. I showed Elena the headline. She read it, nodded once, and then went back to the blueprint. "The foundation for Building C needs to be reinforced," she said, pointing. And that was it. The monster was gone, and we were too busy building to even celebrate. That's the real payoff. Not the victory, but the freedom it creates. Elena Vance learned that power isn't a fortress, it's a foundation. And I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the love for something greater than yourself. We walked out of that park, each holding one of Chloe's hands, swinging her between us. We were not a billionaire and a bartender. We were a family building a future, one honest brick at a time. The story that began with a cut-off drink and a whispered secret ended with a partnership written not in contracts, but in trust. And that is a foundation no one can ever hostilely take over. So what is the real currency of power? Is it the billions, the black cards, the corner offices? Or is it the quiet integrity to hold a line when it matters? The courage to be kind when you have every reason to be cruel? The story of Elena and Alex isn't a fairy tale. It's a blueprint. It shows that the most transformative forces in our world aren't always mergers and acquisitions. Sometimes, they're the moments of human recognition that happen in the most ordinary places, between the most unlikely people. We live in a world that teaches us to sort each other by status, by title, by the clothes we wear or the jobs we hold. But beneath those surface markers, everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. The CEO battling isolation, the single parent battling fear, and in that tension there is a choice, to build taller walls or to build stronger bridges. Elena Vance learned that her empire was hollow without humanity. Alex Hayes learned that his integrity was an asset more valuable than any paycheck. Together, they built something new from the wreckage of the old. Not just a company, but a testament to the idea that the future belongs not to the predators, but to the builders. To those who understand that true security isn't in a bodyguard, but in a community. That real wealth isn't in a bank account, but in the people you trust to hold your story. So here's my question for you. Have you ever been profoundly misjudged by someone because of what you do for a living? Or have you ever caught yourself making a snap judgment about someone else, only to discover a hidden depth that changed your entire perspective? The most fascinating stories aren't found in the headlines. They're found in the quiet collisions of our everyday lives. I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story reminded you that courage comes in all forms, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these important narratives. Share this with someone who needs to remember that their current situation does not define their worth or their future. And if you want to join us for more journeys into the heart of human connection, subscribe and hit the bell. Because the next story of an ordinary moment that changed everything is just waiting to be told. Thanks for watching. Remember, the most powerful person in the room is often the one who hasn't forgotten how to be human. See you in the next one.